This is a book we found in the public domain, public access, titled The Michael Jackson Tapes. A tragic icon reveals his soul in intimate conversation. This is a book by Rabbi Shmuley Boteach. And these other books by this particular rabbi. And it's dedicated to Michael Jackson's children by this rabbi and his son Blanket, whom he never met. May they be inspired by his father's virtue. Be cautioned by his excess and by the living fulfillment of his unrealized dream of healing the world by living lives of selflessness, kindness and compassion. God watch over you and protect you always. Amen. Here's the contents page. Continued. And the rabbi has an inside note here. Was it Michael Jackson? The conversation with Rabbi Shmuley. He says, I'm going to say something I've never said before, and this is the truth. I have no reason to lie to you, and God knows I am telling the truth. I think all my success and fame, and I have wanted it. I have wanted it because I wanted to be loved, that's all. That's the real truth. I wanted people to love me, truly love me, because I never really felt loved. I said I know I have an ability. Maybe I sharpened my craft. Maybe if I sharpened my craft, maybe people will love me more. I just wanted to be loved because I think it is very important to be loved and to tell people that you love them and look them in their eyes and say it. Michael Jackson in conversation with Rabbi Shmuley. I am like a lion, nothing can hurt me, no one can harm me. The same Michael Jackson in conversation with Rabbi Shmuley. Michael Jackson as I knew him, this is according to the rabbi. The morality tale, our friendship, his demons. The morality tale, how this book came to be. This book was being published because it was Michael Jackson's desperate wish that it be so. It contains the most intimate, authentic, raw, painful and insightful conversation for public disclosure that Michael ever produced. There is nothing like it, and since Michael has tragically passed well before his time, there will never be anything like it again. In publishing this book, not only has the author, the rabbi, not broken any confidences, he has fulfilled the desire of a man who wanted his heart to be known to a public whom he understood was deeply suspicious of him. The transcripts this book is based on come from tape recordings of approximately 30 hours of conversation that Michael Jackson and the rabbi conducted between August 2000 and April 2001. With the express purpose of having them published in book form and shared with the public. The conversations focused on a wide range of topics, all with the intent of revealing and explaining the man behind the mask. So eager was Michael to have people understand who he was, that for many of these conversations he held the dictaphone that they used directly to his mouth, so not a single word would be lost. On other occasions he made the rabbi stopped the conversation so he could turn down the air conditioning in his hotel room because he was afraid the noise would drown out his voice on the recordings. If his children, Prince and Paris, who were about 3 and 2 when they began, and present for many of the recordings, got loud, Michael made sure to gently shush them so not a word would be missed. Michael asked the rabbi to write the book because they were very close friends and because he was already an experienced author. The rabbi was already an experienced author and values-based broadcaster and lecturer, and more importantly because the conversations would naturally parallel the steps he needed to take with the rabbi's direction and encouragement to regain his health and equilibrium and redeem himself not only in the eyes of the public but also in his own eyes. In the months ahead, it became a desperate spiritual journey to consecrate his celebrity to a higher end. He wanted to share a deeper side of himself that their friendship, him and the rabbi, had begun to uncover. The rabbi completed a working draft of the book in a year or two after their conversations ended. People who read it said they never knew Michael could be such a deep and inspiring personality. Many of his most well-read friends told the rabbi they cried through the manuscript. Like many others, they had earlier dismissed Michael as a mindless and shallow celebrity materialist who was hopelessly weird. The sensitive personality revealed in the conversations, however, was introspective, knowledgeable, forgiving, and deeply spiritual. But events overtook the making of the book, and the rabbi withheld it from publication. His relationship with Michael had deteriorated because he no longer felt he could influence him positively. He was closing off from his deeper soul and returning to the profligate ways of the self-destructive superstar the world had determined he already was. The rabbi felt he was losing the battle between dissipation and excellence, between going to waste and making a contribution, between being a caricature of himself and being an artist. If an opening still existed to publish these interviews, it was slammed shut when in November 2003 Michael, who had settled sexual abuse allegations out of court in 1993, was accused for a second time of child molestation. There was no way his views would be taken seriously on any subject. It would be impossible for Michael to be heard talking about his views on the needs of children, innocence, and the childlike spirit he believed contributed to the greatness of so many people, without his thoughts simply being dismissed as the rationalizations of an accused paedophile. Plus, anything that was published would simply become more fodder for the publicity frenzy surrounding the case, defeating the purpose of the interviews, which was to cut through the hype and hysteria to reveal the deeper man beneath the albeit extreme public image. And then, 8 years after the interviews, Michael suddenly and tragically died. The rabbi's dormant feelings of sadness, anger, resentment, disappointment, and even love were awakened and intensified by the insanity surrounding his death and the distorted portrayal of his legacy. The rabbi was spurred to finally publish this book. Michael's wish should be fulfilled, says the rabbi. The tapes needed to see the light of day. Whenever people think of Michael, there was good in him and it deserved to come out. Whatever people think of Michael, there was good in him and it deserved to come out. Michael was far from a saint, and the rabbi, for one, has never whitewashed his sins. But there was a gentility and nobility of spirit that the rabbi found humbling and inspiring in a man so accomplished. He realized that the extraordinary things Michael shared with him in these conversations would serve to fill the three giant holes left open by the often tabloid and focus-like media coverage. The first, who was the real Michael Jackson? The second, what pain did he live with that he tried to so hard to medicate away and which ultimately consumed him? And the third, what moral lessons could be extracted from his tragic death that could bring redemption to a life cut short? The final question especially tugged at the rabbi. He watched only parts of his memorial service at the Staples Center. He dismissed it as an outrage, a moral affront. Here was a man who had almost certainly died of a drug overdose. Yet rather than convey even a fragment of the degree of the tragedy, they made his funeral into a concert. America had to read their conversation and learn about the real Michael Jackson. They had to understand that he was never a freak. He was not born to be weird. Rather, fame, his drug of choice, and a rudderless life had destroyed him completely. He was a terrible loss of both innocence and talent. His senseless death cried out for redemption. The principal tragedy of his life was to mistake attention for love, fame for family, material acquisition for true spiritual purpose. The rabbi will never forget how, when they first began the conversations that are the soul of this book, Michael said the haunting words that he used for the epigraph of this book. I am going to say something I have never said before, and this is the truth. I have no reason to lie to you, and God knows I am telling the truth. I think all my success and fame, and I have wanted it. I have wanted it because I wanted to be loved. That's all. That's the real truth. I wanted people to love me, truly love me, because I never really felt loved. I said I know I have an ability. Maybe if I sharpened my craft, maybe people will love me more. I just wanted to be loved because I think it is very important to be loved and to tell people that you love them and to look in their eyes and say it. The rabbi remembers being stunned as he listened to him, his tear-ridden voice hauntingly describing the abject loneliness of his life. One cannot read his statement without feeling a tremendous sadness for a soul who was so surrounded with hero worship but remained so utterly abandoned. Because Michael substituted attention for love, he got fans who loved what he did, but he never had true compatriots who loved him for who he was. The ancient rabbis of the Talmud proclaimed that words which emanate from the heart penetrate the heart. Michael's admission to the rabbi of how all he ever wanted from his career was a love that had so eluded him as a child, pierced his heart like a dagger and drew as close as spiritual soul friends, and drew them closer as spiritual soul friends. He was being summoned into his loneliness. The eulogy that wasn't. The rabbi was filming a TV show with his family in Iceland when his office called and shared the terrible news of Michael's passing. His wife and children were with him in the van, and they could scarcely believe what they had heard. The children all remembered Michael fondly. He had given them their dog Marshmallow, who was still a member of their family. His daughter teared up. His heart bled for his children, the rabbi's heart bled for Michael's children, whom he adored and who adored him in turn. He thought of Prince and Paris, who were his children's playmates, and then brother Prince, too, known as Blanket, who he never met, and how attached they were to a father who regularly told the rabbi that he knew that when they grew up they would be asked by biographers what kind of parent he had been. He wanted them to have only warm memories to share. Alas, the memories will remain largely incomplete. Yet the rabbi was not shocked to get the news. He had dreaded this day that day and knew it would come sooner rather than later. During the 2 years that the rabbi had attempted, ultimately unsuccessfully, to help Michael repair his life, what most frightened him was not that he would face another child molestation charge, although he did, it was that he would die. As the rabbi told CNN on April 22, 2004, in an internationally telecasted interview, his greatest fear was that Michael's life would be cut short. When you have no ingredients of a healthy life, when you are totally detached from that which is normal, and when you are a super celebrity, you, God forbid, end up like Janis Joplin, like Elvis. Michael is headed in that direction. Michael's family publicly disputed any insinuation that he would die. As CNN reported in response to the rabbi's interview, Jackson's family has denied suggestions that the pop star's life is unhealthy, insisting he is doing very well, particularly for someone who faces his unique pressures. The rabbi was also rebuked in that same interview by Raymond Bain, Michael's spokesperson through the trial, and for several years thereafter, who said the rabbi was being reckless and irresponsible for saying that Michael was going to die. On May 6, 2009, Ramon Bain sued Michael for $44 million. 6 weeks later, it didn't matter much because Michael was dead. And the rabbi here says he's no prophet, and it did not take a rocket scientist to see the impending doom. Michael was a man in tremendous pain, and his tragedy was to medicate his pain away rather than addressing its root cause. He confused an affliction of the soul with an ailment of the body, but all the barbiturates in the world could never cure a troubled soul that had lost its way. Yes, from the media's infatuation with every prurient detail of the aftermath of his death, one would think that it was a cartoon character, a caricature of a real man who had died rather than an actual person. Michael always had a mutually exploitative relationship with the American people. He used us to feed his constant need for attention, and we used him to feed our constant need for entertainment. Still, it would have been hard to believe that Michael's story could be more bizarre in death than in life. But from the mother of Michael's two other older children deciding whether or not she wanted her kids, to his dermatologist leaving open the possibility that he is the father of Prince and Paris, to Joe Jackson's talking up his new record label as his son's body lay unburied, to nurses coming forward to claim that Michael had asked them to inject him with quantities of painkillers that would have felled a water buffalo, to doctors being pursued by the feds for acting as medically sanctioned pushers, or drug pushers. Clearly the impossible has been achieved. And just when you thought this theatre of the absurd had reached its zenith, the news came that Michael's memorial service would take place at a basketball arena complete with 12,000 fans, and that the Ringling Brothers Circus would be occupying the same arena the very next day. Were there no adults present to bring proper sobriety to the moment, to actually remind us that a human being had died, that a tormented soul had finally lost its battle with life, and that 3 innocent children had been orphaned? Was there no one to say that what actually destroyed Michael's life and what brought such untold misery to the Jackson family as a whole was an inability to cope with fame? Was there no one who saw that something important and lasting could be learned from Michael's passing by sending him off in a quiet, dignified, truly religious ceremony that focused on the silent acts of kindness he performed rather than the albums he sold? To the rabbi's mind, his death is not just a personal tragedy, but an American tragedy. Michael's story is the stuff of the American dream. A poor black boy who grew up in Gary, Indiana, ends up a billionaire entertainer. But we now know how the story ends. Money is not a currency with which we can purchase self-esteem. Being recognized on the streets will never replace being loved unconditionally by family and true friends. When Robert Oppenheimer witnessed the explosion of the atomic bomb he had worked so hard to develop, he famously quoted from the Bhagavad Gita. It's an Indian or Hindu religious book. I am become death, destroyer of worlds. Anyone who witnessed the tragic implosion of the life of Michael Jackson and its circus aftermath in the weeks following his death might amend the saying to read, I am fame, destroyer of lives. Michael was anything but a monster. He was a thoughtful, insightful, deeply scarred, and at times very profound soul who was so broken that he could find no healing. No amount of fame or screaming fans would ever rescue him from his inevitable descent into the abyss. And according to this guy we listened to giving his testimony about going to hell, etc., he reckons he saw Michael Jackson there, and he was being forced by certain demons to dance, and if he stopped dancing they would beat him. So maybe if this guy's telling the truth, he actually ended up there. Probably not for not believing in God, following God, etc., etc. Michael deserved a different kind of attention, and the public deserved and needed to hear a different kind of message. An eulogy that could bring redemption to Michael's life. In the rabbi's sadness and self-questioning, he wrote and published the following words on July 5th, 2 days before the funeral and memorial service. The death of Michael Joseph Jackson is not just the personal tragedy of a man who died young, nor does it solely represent a colossal waste of life and talent. Rather, it is, above all else, an American tragedy, for whether we wish to acknowledge it or not, our obsession with Michael Jackson, our infatuation with every peculiar detail of his life, stems from the fact that he represents a microcosm of America. It has long been fashionable to caricature Michael as an oddball, as a freak, but how different were his peculiarities to our own. Michael's dream was to be famous so that he would be loved. Having been forced into performing as a young boy, he never knew a time when affection was a free gift. Rather, attention, a poor substitute for love with which he made do, was something that he had to earn from the age of 5. Hence his obsession with being famous and his lifelong fear of being forgotten by the crowds, and if that meant purposefully doing strange things in order to sustain the public's interest or get their attention, he would pay that price too. But how different is that from the rest of us, living as we do in an age of reality TV, where washing our dirty laundry in public makes us into celebrities, and competing on American Idol promises us that we can be the next Michael Jackson. Of course, there was Michael's constant plastic surgery. How much could one man so hate himself, we asked, that he is prepared to disfigure his face utterly? But the same question could easily be asked of millions of Americans, especially women, who live with extremely poor body image, who starve their bodies and undergo extreme cosmetic procedures, including sticking a needle in their forehead to rediscover lost beauty and youth. Yes, there was Michael's troubled soul. Could a man so blessed with fame and fortune, we wondered, really be so miserable that he had to numb his pain with a syringe of Demerol? And yet, my friends, America is the richest country in the world with the highest standard of living. Still, we consume 3/4 of the earth's antidepressants, and 1 out of 3 Americans is on an anti-anxiety medication. As far as Michael's materialism and decadence, particularly when they watched him on TV, spending millions of dollars on useless baubles, useless stuff he didn't need, is it really all that different to the rest of us who have maxed out our credit cards, buying junk we don't need with money we don't have to compensate for an insatiable inner emptiness? There were also Michael's broken relationships, 2 divorces, estrangement from brothers and sisters, and extremely questionable and perhaps even criminal sexual activities. Yes, few of us fortunately are guilty of such crimes, but the huge success of barely legal pornographic websites, Girls Gone Wild videos, and the sexualization of teens like Miley Cyrus should perhaps have us question the adolescent nature of our own sexual interest. As for broken relationships, Time magazine just reported that of every 100 marriages, 50 divorces, 25 stay together unhappily, and only 25 are happy. In sum, my friends, we are fixated on Michael Jackson because he was already just a very extreme version of ourselves, and compacted into his short life a supercharged version of all the strangeness and profligacy of a culture which puts attention before love, fans before family, body before spirit, medical sedation before true inner peace, and material indulgence before spiritual enlightenment. Perhaps the only reason the rest of us did not become as strange or as broken as Michael was that we simply lacked the talent and the resources to do so. And therein lies a profound morality lesson. Where Michael goes, the rest of us go. Our obsession with Michael was always selfish. It was a focus on where we ourselves were headed, where our culture and our interests were leading us. And now we have the power to take a senseless tragedy and give it meaning by learning from the heartbreaking demise of a once great legend that life is not about fame and fortune, but rather about God, family, community, and good deeds. Rest in peace, Michael. May you find in death the serenity you never had in life, and may they judge you more charitably in heaven than we did here on earth. And he goes on about their friendship, how they met. He met Michael, in the summer of 1999 through a friend, Uri Geller, a known psychic, right? And in the summer of 1999, the rabbi was a scholar in residence for a program in Hamptons with his entire family as they prepared to move back to the United States. Uri called him up and simply said, "Shmuley, you should go and meet Michael." He had known that Uri was acquainted with Michael Jackson, and he explained that he told Michael about the rabbi, and that Michael wanted to meet him. By that time he had authored more than a dozen books on marriage, relationships, parenting, and spiritual healing. and he guessed that Uri felt Michael needed some guidance in his life, and it would be good for him to connect with him. So he ends up meeting Michael, and he basically tells him, after he experienced, Michael, together, him and his family, his kids, with Michael's kids, and so forth. Okay. And then he's mentioned that they spoke on the phone a few times. Michael, when he turned up on his second meeting, answered the door, but only after checking that no paparazzi was standing outside. He had brought 2 small gifts with him. The first was a mezuzah, the roll of biblical parchment that Jews affix to their doors, which brings the divine presence into one's home. Normally only Jewish homes display them, but the rabbi said to Michael, God is the source of all blessing. Let this mezuzah always remind you of that. He was moved by the gift, and they jointly affixed it to his front doorpost. It also brought him the rabbi also brought him a Chanukah menorah as a symbol of God's light that should illuminate his life and home. The conversation was open, warm, and surprisingly trusting for a man he was told was so private. He showed him a full-page picture in the New York Post of him walking out of a meeting with the Dalai Lama the day before. He said that he found his conversation with him more enlightening than those he had had with the Dalai Lama. He's talking about the rabbi. His conversations were more enlightening than those that Michael had had with the Dalai Lama. Flattered, the rabbi felt a bit embarrassed, and he responded that the Dalai Lama was a truly great man, and that it was not his league. He's not in his league, not a guru of any kind, so he wasn't on the same level as the Dalai Lama, but simply a man who had chosen to be a rabbi as a direct consequence of his parents' divorce, and is trying to figure out the labyrinth of life using the profound moral code found in God's law, the Torah. Along the way, he sought to share with others what he had discovered about mastering life and establishing an ethical and spiritual foundation into which we could all anchor our lives. As the rabbi was leaving his townhouse, Michael suddenly said, I'd really love to go to synagogue with you. Surprised at the statement, the rabbi asked him if he was serious. Yes, Shmuley, could you please take me to synagogue? The rabbi replied, sure, Michael, it would be a pleasure. I will take you to a synagogue I love. So he takes him to a synagogue on a certain Jewish festival day, right? And people are told, this is a famous star coming, used to be no phones. It's a Jewish thing, right? No phones, no go telling the media that he's there, all this sort of stuff, right? And they really made him feel at home. Okay? And then on Thanksgiving, Michael invites this rabbi's entire family to see the movie Toy Story at a regular theatre. Like it's closed off, so but the theatre comes with goods with drinks and popcorn and all that sort of stuff. And he was quite surprised at this. He was like a child, he laughed at that Toy Story movie. He really loved it, which he thought was kind of strange, for a guy that superstar at that age or whatever. And then he just found himself laughing along, with Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson was sitting behind him, and this rabbi could hear him laughing, and he really liked that movie. Okay, then Michael, the rabbi was going to buy his kids some stuff, and he said, you got $12 each, total of $25, something like that. And Michael said, well, that's not really fair, And these other people were coming in, their kids, whatever, and they're buying untold stuff. But it gets to the stage where he starts teaching Michael, right? But the rabbi says, as a brief aside, he should mention that he never attempted to proselytize Michael to Judaism or convert him, right? Believing in the authenticity of any faith that leads people to God, Judaism is not a faith that seeks converts, and we are commanded, even if someone approaches us to become Jewish, to turn them away at least 3 times. So the rabbi repeatedly encouraged Michael to return to his Christian roots, in particular to the Jehovah's Witnesses Church, where he had been raised. The rabbi brought him into their Jewish rituals, philosophy, and Friday night Sabbath table as a means to help him reconnect with the beauty of prayer and the moving sound of worshipful music, all in the wider context of inspiring him to bring spirituality back into his life. The rabbi certainly believed that Judaism, with its focus on family, community, and righteous action, could play a very positive role in Michael's life, but one does not need to be Jewish to be enriched by Judaism. Before the Christmas and New Year's Eve holidays, without having accomplished any real progress on his new album, Michael left New York and went back to California, and the rabbi and him kept in touch, talking about family and relationships by phone. Okay, it gets even further. Michael opens up surprisingly to this rabbi. And he's at Neverland, and the rabbi comes to realize that magical paradise Michael made, through that magical paradise, Neverland, Michael was making a statement. He had created his own private universe, a world of children's laughter, fun and games, cartoons and candy, a world with no pain. Every human being in every culture has a different vision of paradise. A year later, on September 11, 2001, the world would discover that for an Islamic suicide bomber, it could be an afterlife filled with wide-eyed virgins. For a shallow materialist, it might be a place where money grows on trees. For Jews, it is a future where the predatory instinct has vanished and the wolf lies down peacefully with the lamb. For Michael Jackson, it was a place where no one ever grows up. Because he's like a Peter Pan, right? You know? He saw himself as Peter Pan. Michael was a gracious host. He gave the rabbi's family and him an extensive tour of the almost 3,000 acre ranch, Neverland, showcasing his home, which was not all that large, the rides in the amusement park, the animals in the zoo, and the video and arcade room. The rabbi remembers vividly how he took them to the reptile house and instructed the zookeeper to take out a poisonous rattlesnake which Michael held with tongs. Contrary to all the press reports that Michael was a germaphobe, afraid of his own shadow, clearly this was a man who was not easily shaken. He took them all around the property on his train, after which they toured much of the giant ranch on all-terrain four-wheeled quads, with Michael in the lead, wearing a large white helmet. They had dinner together that evening, and he told them how happy he was to have them at Neverland. But what interested the rabbi most was that even at Neverland, amid his graciousness, Michael, although more relaxed, still appeared shy, uncomfortable and troubled. Okay, and then this boy that had cancer was invited there, and he said, "No, never be afraid of how you look, etc., etc." But then he starts getting accused of molesting this kid, right, when he did it, because the rabbi's family was there. He said, "No way, this is media-generated rubbish, right?" Okay, that he's showing him all this porno material. No, the rabbi said, "No way, not while him and his family, the children were there. There's no way he did that." He's a witness to that, right? It's all lies. Okay, and then it goes on, and then eventually and Michael says, "How can you help me?" basically. And he says, "Well, we've got to do these steps, Michael, On the day of Michael's birthday, the rabbi felt compelled to tell him that something seemed really wrong. Some key ingredient of his life seemed missing. Going a step further, the rabbi said, "I was thinking what to get you for your birthday." And he discovered it's quite a conundrum. What do you give to the man who seemingly has everything? All the rabbi came up with is that you're not in need of any material gifts, but you are hurting deep down. If I could, I would offer you what I believe you need most, the gift of inspiration. That comment was an icebreaker. Michael opened up to the rabbi more than ever before. The shyness and reticence disappeared. He began to tell the rabbi that he was correct about his deep pain and permanent sadness. And he said all he ever wanted in life was to do something for the world's children. Fame, money, they mean nothing to him. They meant nothing to him, really. He wanted to devote his life to helping kids. While he did not say it outright, it was clear that he realized that there was little involvement he could have with kids after serious events of 1993, including the multi-million-dollar settlement with his accuser, which, while never officially made public, somehow the whole world seemed to know about it, right? Yeah. And he said those allegations were just a big lie, over and over and over again, and they were designed to extort money from him. He could never harm a child. People were jealous of his success and tried to bring him down. You know, like, when you got a lot of money, you always got these pretend friends hanging around you. They're trying to feed off you, right? They're like cockroaches. He repeated that he did not care about the money. He cared about people who thought ill of him. Up until that comment, the rabbi was convinced that Michael could relate only to people who deferred to him or even fawned over him with a steady diet of compliments. Give him all these compliments, probably after something, right? While him and the rabbi had many interesting conversations, he'd given him some cursory spiritual direction and counsel that he hoped was helpful, and he never expected their friendship to penetrate to a deeper level. It had been a year since they'd met, but until their trip in Neverland, he hadn't penetrated below the surface or broken any significant ground with Michael. Okay, then the rabbi moved to the East Coast, and then he meets Michael again, and Michael Jackson opened up to him in a way that he suspected he had really done with anyone else before. So the rabbi decided to rise to the challenge, beginning by sharing some of the distasteful truths about his life. The rabbi looked at him and told him that if he wanted to be a credible global spokesperson for children, he was going about things in entirely the wrong way. The rabbi told him, "You need a new approach to your project of helping children and to the entirety of your life." The rabbi ventured, "What you lack above all is credibility. You are famous, sure. As an artist, they give you credit for your immense talent, but as a human being, the world thinks you are strange at best and a bit crazy at worst. They think there is something really fishy about you, and kids and many even think you're guilty of the 1993 accusations. Only through a major lifestyle shift, a moral makeover, can you gain back the respectability you've lost." And at any moment, the rabbi expected to get the glazed look he had seen before when subjects came up that were either unpleasant or too much of a strain for Michael to handle. But he did not get that. The rabbi didn't get that. On the contrary, he listened to every word that the rabbi said and then eagerly asked, "Would you be able to help me do this?" "Whoa," was the rabbi's reaction. Was he really listening? He said to Michael, "If you are serious and you take it seriously," he said, "then yes, I will be prepared to help you. I think you can do a lot of good with your life. God has given you a microphone to the world that few people in history have ever possessed. But you have got to get your life together if you are not to squander your potential. Today is your birthday, Michael, and the clock is ticking." Right then and there, he began to outline a program that Michael would follow for the next 9 months. The rabbi told him that the first thing he needed to do was get people to take him seriously. "Your life did not end in 1993, the rabbi told him. Even though the allegations against him were very serious, he was never arrested, charged or convicted. If serious people take you seriously and you undertake respectable actions and get away from your more frivolous pursuits, then the world will overlook your past and respect you again. If you're going to be a spokesman for children, Michael, you need to surround yourself with respected thinkers, authors, statesmen, and especially child-rearing experts. And you can never be alone with a child that is not yours again. Ever." Michael immediately agreed with him, the rabbi. He verbalized his commitment to never being alone with kids. The rabbi had a click of insight about the solution for Michael was to work with parents and caregivers rather than kids. After all, the problem for many kids was that they were being raised by proxy because parents were too busy, too stressed, or too uninterested to give children what they needed most: time and love, family, dinners, bedtime stories. "Work on bringing your message to the world's parents," the rabbi said. "You will help the kids and the world will be grateful." The rabbi then told him he had to get his energy back. Neverland may be beautiful, but it is way too isolated. You have got to get out of here and be around people who inspire you. You are a person who thrives on the adrenaline rush that comes from crowds, but here you are in this beautiful paradise. But you have to ask yourself, are you here because you love it or because you are hiding? Then the rabbi talked about the obstacles he faced. The world simply did not get what he was about. Every day there are 1,000 lies about you in the papers, Michael, he said, the rabbi said. He himself read that he had 10 nannies for the kids, and that if one of their toys so much as touches the floor, Michael Jackson immediately threw it in the garbage because he was a supposed germophobe. From being with Michael at that time, he's seen, well, over time, he's seen that all of that is a lie. Was a lie. Michael had one nanny, Grace, a sweet and highly intelligent woman from Rwanda, who was responsible for sparking his considerable interest, the rabbi's considerable interest, in the terrible Rwandan genocide of 1994, about which the rabbi would later write many columns. And there are tons of other lies as well. You have done a very poor job, Michael, of explaining yourself to the world or responding to those incessant attacks. You have never explained why you have chosen to remain so childlike, and people do not understand it. In light of the 1993 allegations, and in the absence of such explanation, people are bound to conclude that a 40-something adult who refuses to grow up is either spoiled or has a screw loose. While it's pretty understandable, not knowing anything about Michael Jackson, never knowing the guy, that psychologically he suffered because he didn't have a childhood. There were times when he saw kids playing in a park, and that's what he wanted to do. But his stepfather Joe said, no, got to work, etc., etc. He'd probably slapped them around, beat them up, all that sort of stuff, put them into place, and they became these. Obviously, they became famous, Jackson 5, etc. But that's what he longed for. He just wanted to be a child for a day, go out and play in the sun with other kids. But he was never allowed. So that's probably what affected him, right? And that's why he desired the company of children, That's what he longed for. He wanted to be loved. He never felt love. He never felt like he was loved. He was just like this cog in a wheel, part of a mechanism. Get famous, make money, make me money, His stepfather, Joe Jackson, right? And he achieved it. Got Michael famous, etc. He's making all this money, but probably behind the scenes was about him, make me money, make more money. And then Michael Jackson's lying in his coffin. He's going on about his album, something that he's going to be putting out, something like that, earlier on in the story. So the rabbi told him that he had to make sure that he had the ingredients of a wholesome life. He could see that they were mostly absent. On his birthday, no family members came to visit. There was no regular Sunday church attendance. Indeed, aside from his personal faith, God seemed to be entirely absent from the life of Michael Jackson. He had no interaction with loving friends and seemed to take little satisfaction from his work. His children had no other kids to play with, and their degree of isolation was anything but healthy. It's not good to be alone, right? And isolation it'll probably drive you mad. You've got to get out there and, That's what we found from experience, right? Staying at home, being introverted, over-introverted. You don't see anybody. You're sort of paranoid when you go out there. But then when you meet people, you talk to them to death, and you're like, what the hell, You just haven't seen people for like 2 weeks. No one's come around to visit you. Your children, your grandchildren, whatever. You've got no one to talk to. The only thing you can talk to is like on character AI and stuff like that, on a social chat site, if you're lucky. Michael indicated that this would be a wonderful birthday present that the rabbi was offering him, by the looks of it. And Michael opened up and he says, my whole life is about doing things for kids. If I can't help children, I don't want to live. I'm desperate, and I think you're the only one, Rabbi, who can help me. You're my friend. I love you, and I know you can help me. To be sure, it was extremely seductive and flattering to have a man as influential as Michael Jackson telling him that he was the only one who could help him. It didn't so much feed his vanity, because his issue has always been insecurity much more than vanity, although the argument can be made that they are intimately intertwined. But it certainly made the rabbi feel special. Was this a cosmic drama that was playing out? Could it be that a rabbi and a rock star could team up to help make the world a better place? Could the dream that he had harboured ever since he watched his parents divorce at the tender age of 8, of healing and strengthening families, come to fruition through the agency of Michael's fame and extend the effect of the writing and speeches that the rabbi had already been giving around the world? Or was his natural internal brokenness coupled with the rabbi's desire to be or was the rabbi's natural internal brokenness coupled with his desire to be recognized as an exponent of values simply grabbing onto a rickety foundation to anchor itself? Only time will tell. What was certain was that this was a unique challenge, an opportunity to help a man change and to help rehabilitate a person who was becoming a friend, who was a star, and who had shared his love for children and the need to value them in our culture, or in culture. He, after all, had 7. We now have 9. Thank goodness. So this rabbi's got 7 or 9 something. If Jay Leno owned 7 antique cars, he was to be lauded for his impressive collection. But the rabbi went around apologising for having overpopulated the world with 7 kids. He was part of a religion that cherishes the innocence of children as the most spiritual of qualities. Why? Even the cherubim, the twin angels who sat atop the Holy Ark in the Holy of Holies, the most sacred part of the temple in Jerusalem, had the faces of children. As a rabbi, he was a representative of a culture that values family and children above all else. And at that moment he was being asked by one of the most recognisable names on earth to assist him in his work to improve the lives of children around the world. So this rabbi went back to his room and got his laptop, and with Michael and this guy Frank at his side, they started typing out a plan of action that could turn Michael's life around, leverage his fame to heal families, expose him to some of the world's most respected people, and bring sound, healthy foundations back into his life. Before the rabbi departed Neverland a few days later, Michael and him had further agreement that at some point soon he would come to New York for a few months, and they would work hand in hand to help him regain his equilibrium and implement a plan of action to improve the lives of children and parents. Most significantly, sitting in his bedroom and library before he left, they began the tape-recorded conversations that serve as the very soul of this book. And it goes through talking about the struggle to do the right thing. When they met again, and public events where Michael could show a much more serious side of himself. The rabbi brought Professor Stanley Greenspan, one of the top child-rearing experts in America, to get to know him. He introduced him to his hero, the rabbi's hero, Eli Wiesel, the Holocaust survivor and Nobel laureate, and his wife. He took Michael to see a few friends of his in finance to try and help him get his financial life under control. Nothing came of it, but they at least sat him down and told him his true situation, which basically was that he was bankrupt and on his way to financial oblivion. It was a complete effort on his behalf. In addition, Michael stopped what he saw as his destructive secrecy. The trust between the rabbi and himself was total. At least that's what he was led to believe. His access to him was unlimited. If he walked into his hotel room, Michael was taking a shower, he'd say, "Oh, pop out with a towel," say, "Oh, I'll be out in a minute," right? And so forth. And often the rabbi would arrive at his hotel suite and wake him up because he told him how important it was for him to break out of his pattern of staying up most of the night and sleeping most of the day, something for which Elvis Presley was famous for as well. For those few months, Michael probably came as close to living a normal life as he ever had or would. The rabbi's objective was to stop getting him to see himself as an aloof deity who was beyond reproach. He was a man who happened to sing and dance better than almost anyone else alive, but he was a man nonetheless. He was not to be worshipped, and he required the healthy ingredients of a normal life like anyone else. To achieve this end, they saw each other nearly every day, even on the Sabbath, when Michael would come to their home across the Hudson River in New Jersey with his 2 children for the Friday night Sabbath meal. Those Sabbath dinners were extremely important because Michael not only immersed himself in a nourishing spiritual environment, but also mixed comfortably with the other guests who regularly attended their Sabbath meals. This may sound like no big deal, but for Michael, who had really been treated as a mortal, sitting next to other people and simply conversing was a very big deal. They would tell their Shabbos guests beforehand that a well-known personality would probably be joining them for dinner, and would they mind simply treating him like everyone else. It was interesting watching Michael making small talk with people around the table, and after a few awkward starts, Michael was always very shy in public. He did a respectable job and charmed their guests. Friday nights, they usually have a prayer service for members of their community at their home, and one Friday night when Michael came, they were dancing and singing in a giant circle, about 30 of them. Michael joined the circle and danced with everyone else. The rabbi remembers how much he smiled that night, like it was liberating just joining rather than always being aloof from the crowd, or just way from the crowd, out of the crowd, away from other people. They also spent time talking about the basic requirements of a healthy life. The rabbi would say to him, you have to get up at a normal hour and you have to go to sleep at a normal hour. Life needs structure. Your kids have to play with other people's kids, and they have to go to parks and to school. Even if you are divorced, your children need access to both parents to grow up as secure and well balanced as possible. That really works. Okay, if you have a partner, you've got children, out of marriage or wedlock even, and you're still friends and you interact, like maybe they got a partner, whatever, and there's no problem here, going backwards and forwards, spending time with your children, your exes and your child, it's really good. Just put all the whatever happened in the relationship aside. Okay, be their friend. You need family who love you unconditionally, and you must reconcile with them if you have fallen out. Okay, it's like in the Bible where it says, before you offer a gift at the altar, if you've got something against your brother, go see him and forgive him or ask for forgiveness or whatever, and then come back and place your offering at the altar, right? That sort of thing. Forgiveness, right? So, because how can you be forgiven if you don't forgive others? How can you expect God to forgive you? Okay. He said to Michael, you cannot isolate yourself. You need normal friends who can tether you to the earth and to whom you are accountable. You need family who will love you unconditionally, and you must reconcile with them if you have fallen out. Most of all, you need God, the architect of humanity and the source of all blessings, who gives us rules by which we all thrive. You have to stop making the rules up as you go along. The rabbi talked to Michael about the importance of struggling to do the right thing, of replacing his desire for attention with a hunger for righteous action, and of understanding that the effort was as important for happiness as some perfect result. The rabbi then talked to him about one of the things that most distinguishes Judaism from Christianity. It is not the belief in Jesus as God or deity, rather it's the belief in the perfection of Jesus. When Christians ask, what would Jesus do? They are using a model of perfection to guide their actions. And the rabbi began to think that makes a lot of people feel that they can never attain that high station of perfect action. We've got to strive for it. We've had people that comment say, we can't be sinless, because it says this and it says this and it says this in this part. You're making excuses. Did you even try? It's something you got to work at. It doesn't just happen instantly like 2-minute noodles. Okay, so the rabbi started to think in America they don't like themselves. They harbour a high degree of self-loathing because they're not realistic about when we dismiss our humanity. What a shame that we have an ego What a shame that this rabbi said, what a shame that I have an ego. What a shame that I'm married and I'm attracted to people who are not my spouse. Yeah. Yeah, this is what the rabbi is saying. What a shame you've got a big ego. What a shame you're married and you're looking at somebody else. You're attracted to others on the side. That you do that sort of thing to your own wife. In Judaism, there are no perfect figures in the Bible. They are all flawed. They're all flawed. The greatest of prophets, Moses, can't get into the promised land because of sin. Well, he was told, like, hit this a certain rock or something like that, water comes out, whatever, and he didn't do it. Something like that. And he said, God said, because of that, you're not going to enter into the promised land or something like that. We all struggle to do the right thing and a predilection to do otherwise. Christians define righteousness as perfection. Jews define righteousness as a struggle. We wrestle with our nature. We try to do better always. We acknowledge from the very outset the tendencies within us that are altruistic, that are greedy, that are giving, that are self-absorbed, and that are selfless. There's a constant struggle, and we do our best to make the right choice simply because it's right, even when we sometimes are falling very short of our own expectations. In that sense, we are more forgiving of ourselves, although we are not forgiving of our unacceptable actions. So it's a good idea. It's like pray every day. Say to God, look, I think reveal what's in my heart, and if it's like sinful, etc., remove it. Stuff like that. Check my heart, O Lord. Check what I'm saying, etc., etc. And if it's sinful, well, help me get rid of it. Perfect it, change it, whatever. Okay, his point to Michael was that he had demons. Michael had demons, probably more than most, but that was okay as long as he wrestled to overcome them. That's what you got to do, right? You got as a believer, whether you're a Jew into Judaism, a Muslim into Islam, right, or a Christian of some denomination, you've got to strive. Okay, like what does the Bible say? Put on the full armour of God. Resist the devil. So he'll flee from you. Use the power of the name of Jesus. Right? Be determined. Have that will and say, no, I'm not doing that. The devil comes, whispers behind you and says, ooh, just go watch that. You're getting all this tension, you're getting all this hormones racing through you. Whatever. Just go over there and relieve yourself. Relieve the tension. Come on, you need to relieve the tension. And say, nah, I'm not doing that, mate. Because that would cause me to sin. Okay, it's lust, it's perversion, whatever. And my Lord and Master, my Saviour, my God would not be very pleased. So you got to keep doing that all the time. Use it is written. Use the power of Jesus' name. And say, it is written, thou shalt not. Even if a man looks at a woman with lust in his heart or mind, he's committed fornication with her. Learn those verses and have them embedded in your head, right? So you can easily recall them. You have to have a renewed mindset. Be born from above, born from the head. Be reborn from the head. So you'll be like Christ-like, right? Filled with the Holy Spirit. So that's your first teacher, counselor, etc., and you're directed by the Spirit. Not so much the Bible, because then you get too technical, the theology, you get too mechanical, you get bogged down, and you're like, oh, it says here and it says here, but you're fighting over what it means. It's a hell of a lot easier if you just rely on the Spirit of God, right, to move you, to teach you, to help you, to improve you as your first counselor. It's a hell of a lot easier. You get too technical, you get too bogged down and mechanical, you become this mechanical puppet, right? Everyone's trying to tell you, oh, you should be like this, you should be like that. Half the time none of them are like that. If you're a Christian, you'll be doing this, and if you're a Christian, you'll be doing that. And this particular Christian is like being a Christian on Sunday, and you catch him in the pub on Tuesday, drunk, carousing with loose women and stuff. Wow, now that's a real Christian, right? Okay, these are these actors, these role players. You've got to be the real deal. Even Christ tells you that, right? He'd rather you not be cold nor hot. He'd rather you be lukewarm, rather than cold or hot. And many other scriptures like that. Get to the pearly gates and he says, no, I don't know you. Sorry, I don't know you. Why? Oh, because you never made me your Lord and Master. Yeah, you're chasing this woman around and doing that and doing that and doing that. That's what he said to supposedly to these Pharisees that turned up at the gate, right? Would turn up at the gate. Sorry, I don't know you. You flee, 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 get away, go away, you doers of iniquity. And they obviously get thrown into hell or something, and there's gnashing of teeth and all that sort of stuff. You cussing them and all that. But why? We gave to the poor, we visited those in jail, didn't we? He says, oh yeah, but I never knew you. You never made me your Lord and Master. Yeah? You did this, you did that. You're like, what's that thing? You cleaned your cup on the outside, but you forgot to wash the inside first, that sort of thing. You looked all holy on the outside, but inwardly you're like whitewashed tombstones, etc., etc. So it gets to the stage where Michael is trying, but then he starts failing, and this rabbi started to see that. Okay. He says here that Michael he knew and observed, we got to know and observed, frequently remarked on the attractiveness of women and was open to thinking about the possibility for a better marriage in the future. Additionally, he never expressed an interest in men or made any kinds of comments that would indicate he was a homosexual or that there was something hidden truth or some hidden truth about his sexuality. And what the rabbi now believes is that Michael didn't trust women and thus did not feel safe with them. When he learned of Michael's use of pornography, which came out in his 2003 trial, and combined this knowledge with everything he told him about his childhood exposure to adult sexuality of a largely degrading, overwhelming kind, he could see how he may never have experienced a sense of innocence around sex or never matured beyond an adolescent sexual self. And then the rabbi realized that one of Michael's most recent biographers claims to have evidence that Michael was gay. The rabbi never saw anything that would lead him to that conclusion or indicate that he was gay. Michael never even hinted that there were any men around to whom he felt attracted, and he never saw any man who could possibly have been Michael's lover. Michael knew that this rabbi had a gay Orthodox Jewish brother whom he loves and respects, and he met his brother on several occasions. So he also knew that he would not have been shocked had he shared with the rabbi that he was gay, but he never did. The rabbi therefore purposed what he saw as his responsibility of encouraging Michael to rebuild his family with a wife for the sake of his children as well, and the rabbi was adamant that a maternal presence he introduced into his life, but he told him that while he was not averse to marriage, he had tried it twice and failed. He was very concerned that most women would marry him for his money. Gold diggers. There was one woman in particular who struck a positive note with Michael that fall, and his experience of meeting her gave him hope, or gave the rabbi hope. He had known Katie Couric from the Today Show. She had interviewed him for two of his books, and they stayed in touch. She asked if the rabbi would introduce her to Michael, so he arranged a lunch for the three of them that took place at Michael's suite at the Four Seasons. The meeting was warm and pleasant, and as soon as Katie departed, Michael turned to the rabbi and said, "Shmuley, you are always encouraging me to date, but the women I meet aren't right for me. Someone like Katie might be perfect. She was smart, natural, and wasn't intimidated being around me. She's obviously very special." "Well, Michael," the rabbi replied, "I guess they didn't call her America's sweetheart for nothing. But are you seriously suggesting that you want to go out with her?" "Yeah," Michael said, "maybe for a coffee or something." "Why didn't you ask her?" said the rabbi. Michael giggled nervously. "Shmuley, you know how shy I am." "Okay," the rabbi said, "do you want me to ask her for you?" And Michael Jackson said, "Yeah, would you?" That's how shy he was. And goes on about that. Katie was tragically widowed and was raising her two daughters as a single mother. But indeed, the rabbi had no idea that she was in a relationship. "I guess not," he said sheepishly, and he apologised for the call. No, don't apologise, she said. You had good intentions, and she would not have revealed the story not for the fact that Katie told the story on the David Letterman show in August 2009, but clearly this and many other demonstration of Michael's heterosexual leanings gave the rabbi a strong belief that Michael was attracted to women. Yeah, there's a lot of women apparently like he'd have that high pitched voice, but when he talked to women it was like a different voice. You know, and he's really nice and all this sort of stuff. He's actually quite seductive sort of thing, you know. They were saying there's some reporter that like got the hots for him into just interviewing him, right? Because he talked to her not in that high voice, you know. That usually has. It was actually a lower voice. Yeah, it goes on like that. It got to the point where he couldn't do anything more for Michael because it just wasn't working. It just for some reason he went backwards, you know. With the plan that they had. And Michael's got an important message of healing here. It's quite lengthy. It's about 3 or 4 pages in length. So, there's much more in this particular book. We found that very, very interesting. Having an insight into Michael Jackson through a very close friend, a rabbi, a known rabbi. So if you like this video, subscribe to our channel, give us a like, add your comments, keep them mature, and then go share this video with all your family, friends and others. They may be anti-Michael Jackson, you know, saying this and that and this and that, but maybe when they read this book, they see this video and then go read this book. We'll leave the link below the video so you can do that. They may have a different outlook on him, you know. We basically think it was all to get money off him, right? To ruin him, because you know he's worth more dead than alive. So they come up with all these accusations. People trying to fleece money off him. But basically, down to, in sum, really, the poor guy had no life, no childhood, and that's what he really wanted. He wanted to be loved. He didn't feel he was being loved or ever loved. And he, basically, from when he was a kid, you know, Jackson 5, whatever, he saw children outside playing, and that's what he wanted to do. But his stepfather Joe said, no, work, you know. Behind the scenes, probably to make him money. He made them famous, sure, but what was his objective behind the scenes? Was it to make money? Probably, you know. He took them, you know, made them stars and stuff, etc., up until the point where Michael Jackson had enough and broke away from him, right? I don't think he really hated him or disrespected him or anything. Like, he just felt you've got to get away from this guy, you know. Yeah, so again, if you liked this video, you really liked it, then subscribe to our channel, add your comments, and keep them mature. Adult like, right? And then go share this video with all your family, friends, and others.